name is Dave Dillion. From 2018 to 2021, I was fortunate to have the opportunity to serve on the Society of Actuaries Board of Directors. Before I served on the board, I have to be honest, I really didn't know much about the ins and outs of the election process and the board's role within that process. The aim of this video is to provide more information to SOA members about the board of directors, the election process, and the interaction of the two. I will start with a brief introduction that really centers on a key principle regarding the SOA board. And that principle is that service as an SOA board member equates to leadership within the organization and the actuarial profession. SOA board members serve an important role in helping the organization carry out its mission, realize its opportunities, and fulfill its obligations to members, candidates, and other stakeholders. To fill the board, there are annual elections where one president-elect and vice chair, along with 5 board members, are elected to serve. Job descriptions and criteria for these 2 roles can be found on the elections page of the SOA, which is soa.org/elections. That webpage has a lot of good information regarding elections, including key dates for the election process, which include the call for nominations period, which is open during the month of April. After the nominations have been carefully considered, the SOA will announce the election ballot by June 16th. For applicants who did not make the ballot, the petition process is available from late June to late July. And after the petition period ends, the SOA election will be held August 22nd to September 9th, with results being targeted for a September 13th release date. A question that gets asked a lot is exactly how does the SOA board operate? Well, the short of it is it's a strategic board. It is not an operational board. So what does that mean? Well, it means the board spends about 90% of its time on big picture strategy and policy issues, not day-to-day stuff. So this approach reinforces the board's leadership role in setting the direction for the actuarial profession and the SOA. And it helps leverage the time, expertise, and experience of each of the board members. If you're interested in learning more about a board agenda, please email elections@soa.org. Another question that's asked a lot is about who gets to decide what the agenda is for the board. And I think sometimes there's a misperception that the new president-elect or chair gets to set the direction. And that's just not true. It is a collaborative approach between all board members, and it's all focused on the strategic plan. So the work of the SOA and the board is driven by this plan and not by one group or individual. So that's very important to remember. So being focused on the strategic plan, the SOA board focuses its efforts on determining what needs to be done next rather than reviewing what was done. So that plan is kind of laid everything out and kind of goes step by step, talk it out, and help the SOA move forward. So the board sets the strategic direction and then turns it over to another volunteer group or SOA staff for the next steps in the action and the implementation of the plan. So the board also considers issues of capacity, which could be financial and human resources related, core capabilities, and the strategic positions before deciding what to do. What am I getting myself into? Like any SOA volunteer, it does take some time. And what is that time? What does it take? Well, there's 4 board meetings a year. There's one in March, and that varies in location every year. There's a June board meeting that's in conjunction with the SOA health meeting. There's an October meeting held in conjunction with SOA impact meeting and exhibition. And then in November, there's an SOA leadership orientation meeting in Chicago where the board also gathers at that time. There could be some additional short virtual meetings throughout the year. And those might be during the work week, but those are typically, 60 to 120 minutes long. Not as much a commitment as the in-person meetings. Now about the meetings, the in-person meetings, they are typically a day and a half. They do include like a reception and dinner and other social time. So you do get to meet the other volunteers on the board and get to know who you're working with and things like that. In terms of the prep time, It can take about 5 to 6 hours of reading and reviewing the agenda packets and things like that before each meeting. In terms of travel, it's about 8 to 9 days a year to travel to attend those meetings. Um, there could be other commitments based on committees. And then there could be a speaking invitation to, universities or other actuarial groups, because those are spread out between all board members. And the commitment chart can be found on the SOA website. So, who is responsible for SOA elections? Well, there's a few groups involved, and it starts with the board of directors. And the board comprises of 15 members. There's 15 board members, and then 3 presidential positions: the president and chair, the president-elect and vice chair, and the past president. Should be noted that in October of 2021, the board approved title changes to help clarify the president's role, that it's also a chair of the board meeting. So this group, kind of leads the organization and the actuarial profession through the SOA strategic plan. It performs fiduciary, strategic, and policy responsibilities. You can check out a video on the fiduciary duties of a board member on the SOA website for more information. Now, specifically regarding elections, there's 2 committees that are heavily involved. One is the Governance and Policy Committee, and it oversees a lot of things, including elections. And that's comprised of 5 to 6 board members out of the bigger set. It identifies and appoints the nominating committee members, which we'll talk about again here in a second. And the Governance and Policy Committee, or GOPO as we call it, has oversight for the election processes and the policies that are followed. And it reports directly to the SOA board. The nominating committee is comprised of 9 fellows, and they each serve a 3-year term. They review the election process and the policies annually based on previous election experience. This nominating committee nominates the ballot of candidates for election in accordance with SOA policies, conducts the annual election, and then 3 new committee members are appointed every fall to get new people involved in the process. And this group reports to the Governance and Policy Committee. So how do nominations work? Well, I mentioned that the Governance and Policy Committee and the Nominating Committee were the main groups that were involved with elections at the SOA. So those 2 groups get together, they determine issues facing the profession, they identify the skills and experience needed for the board for the next year. They'll assess, what board members are rolling off, what were their backgrounds, making sure that, the board for the following year has a nice diverse mix of people to help guide the SOA. The nominating committee will publicly post the call for nominations. Then the NomCom will review the nominees submitted. They'll complete background checks. They'll do interviews with all the nominees. And they'll review the questionnaire that each nominee will submit based on their experience, their strategic thinking, core competencies, and things like that. So NomCom will review those questionnaires, they'll assess those results, and they will determine the election ballot based on the mix of skills and criteria they think are needed for the next year. Then nominating committee will submit the ballot of endorsed candidates to the board for the approval, then have completed its work, following all the policies and procedures. And then once there is board approval, the nominating committee will notify the endorsed candidates of them making the slate for the ballot for the next year. So who gets to vote? Well, the elections for the SOA are open to fellows of the SOA and to associates of the SOA that have been members for 5 years or more. So once the SOA announces the final slate of candidates, the SOA will release each candidate's election questionnaire, and their web pages will be posted on the SOA website, and emails will be sent to members. So eligible members will receive login credentials and password for their electronic ballots via email. Then an independent vendor manages the ballot voting process itself. Then the election results are sent to SOA leaders for review and verification, and the candidates are notified. The SOA will publicly announce the elected candidates after all of this has taken place. As a reminder, keep in mind the 2022 dates for the election process. April 1st through the 29th is when that call for nominations will come out. Then the election ballot will be announced June 16th. And then the petition process for anybody that is interested in doing that is from June 30th through July 29th. Once that petition process is complete, the SOA election will be held from August 22nd to September 9th. And then, hopefully, the election results will be announced around September 13th to September 14th. If you want to learn more than what these videos provided, you can go to soa.org/elections. Thank you for listening to this SOA video about the Board of Directors and the election process.